G'day guys, what's cracking? It's Ralph here, and if you're new here, please subscribe below, join our creative crew. We'd love to have you around and have your input as we go forward on the videos that are on Tuesday and Saturday mornings. So give us a thumbs up and be part of the action. Today I have a really exciting conversation, but first, do you like my new setup? Like, I've realized that there used to be like a light just here, and behind the light was a soundproofing, and behind the soundproofing was a window, and I'm like, oh, let's open up the natural light. So I've done that. I've opened up the natural light, so we're naturally lit. Got some new microphones happening, got the Rode NTG3, so pretty stoked with that. So let me know if you think the quality is up, and stick around for this amazing conversation. Not working. Gosh. Oh, it's so good. Today we have something really special for you. I'm having a chat with a really good mate of mine. His name's Craig Hindman, and he's one of the most creative people I know. And we were out filming a segment where we compared two drones, his Mavic 2 Pro and my Mavic Air 2, which the link will be at the end of this video, so you can check that out. And then afterwards, he was on his way to move house to go down to Adelaide. And I'm like, hey man, can I ask you some questions about creativity? Stick on the Osmo Action. We'll just film it here in the dog park. It was a beautiful morning, plenty of dogs around, a heap of wind that we didn't sense at the time. So real apologies for that. There's a little bit of wind interference, but it gets much, much better as the conversation goes on. And so we had this incredible conversation where I threw some epic questions at him and he gave some even more epic answers that I wanted to share with you, because photography is all about creativity, and I think you will be enriched by this conversation, because I was enriched by it. I learnt heaps, and as you engage with more creativity, you become more creative yourself. So that's the heart behind it. So if you like these types of videos, let me know in the comments below. And also, I'm going to timestamp the questions so you can have a look down below and think, oh, I'm not interested in 1, 2, but number 3 and 4, boom, going straight there. So just to make life a little bit easy for you. And if you have any questions that you wish I could have asked Craig, because I still can, because he's a good mate, so put them in the comments below. And if you have any insights or your own ideas about some of the questions, I'd love to hear that, because I'd love for this to be a community where everyone learns and everyone subscribes and jumps on, gives a thumbs up. So if you hear something you like, give it the thumbs up. We're not going to muck about anymore. Let's go. G'day guys, I'm with Craig Hindman, who is, I don't know if I've ever told you this, you're the most creative person I know.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I thought it'd be great to steal a few moments to talk about creativity. Obviously the channel's all about photography and video, but creativity in general expands to all sorts of different things. What do you think makes someone or helps someone become and be creative?
Well, firstly, I think everybody is creative in some capacity, and it's the art of the imagination, isn't it? Creativity. So it's your ability to imagine and then explore what you imagine, and finding the right tools, and I guess just, I don't know, giving yourself permission to explore and create something that you haven't seen before. I think that, like, the thing about creativity is not necessarily creating something completely new, but maybe presenting a different perspective on something that maybe has already been created. Like, so the first time, I don't know, like, you see a picture of a wave and that's great, but the first time you ever saw a video from underneath the waves of a surfer going over top in slow motion, now that's just a surfer on a wave, but the perspective was just like, you know, the first time you ever saw a drone shot from the top of a tree looking down, to me was just like mind-blowing. And like, there's nothing special about a tree, but a different perspective of a tree is pretty amazing. So I guess part of that is just the exploration of how can I see things differently? How can I view things from a different perspective that actually creates wonder again?
Love it. Yeah, that idea of wonder and beauty really captivates me and draws me into photography. I was talking to a friend yesterday who is an actor, and Claire got to meet Baz Luhrmann, right, the director. I asked what's he like, and she said he is a total creator. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, he'll walk through the set and he'll envisage what more he wants or how he wants changed, and he'll direct based on that, as opposed to coming with a plan. And so it's always moving, there's always change and dynamic, but he sees it in his head first, and then he calls people to it. And it's not that it's never ever been done before, but it's never been done in that way before. And And it was fascinating to hear Claire go. It was so different to work with him, who operated in that way rather than a set plan.
I think when you say the whole he sees it in his head first, that's giving your imagination permission to just explore different ideas or whatever. Like, what could this look like? How could this be presented in a different way that sparks fascination?
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been doing photography in various ways for a long time. You do some weddings on the side. You do a bit of event photography. You've got a photo booth.
Yeah, we have a photo booth.
Got a photo booth. Sorry, man. Got a photo booth. Out of all the forms of photography available, if you had a spare day and a camera, what would you most like to go shoot?
I think I like capturing emotion with people, whereas you're a bit more of a landscaper.
It's true. I don't like emotional.
You don't like emotional?
Jokes.
I think I love taking my kids out and just trying to capture like moments. I think sometimes a still shot of capturing the right moment maybe says more than a video. But having said that, there'll be 1,000 people that disagree with me, but that's kind of my sweet spot in terms of passion. However, I've been inspired by your landscape photography.
Oh, thanks, man.
And so I'm going to do a little bit more of that this year. So 2021 for me is the year of landscape. Surely it can't be that hard.
It's easy, man. I've got this great YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, no, I will. I'll check it out. Yeah, definitely. I definitely will.
It's all photography is all about light. It's all about the manipulation of light and the use of light. As you think about that, you think about photography. How would somebody who perhaps has never picked up a camera, or they've got one and they're like, how do you work light? Whether it's those special family moments and capturing that emotion, whether it's a scene, whether it's going to an event that you're really excited about and capturing that. What are some thoughts people can have in the back of their minds about how you use light to your advantage? You thought the question before was tricky.
All right. I like to get philosophical on a lot of these sort of things, but it's actually the marriage between light and shade that actually creates interest. It's the use of available light versus the use of unavailable light, and how you play those off against each other. So you just walk into any space and go, what do I have available to me, and how can I best utilize that? So and don't you reckon like it's all about trial and error?
Yeah, for sure.
Like
digital photography is amazing, right?
Because you can just keep trying and boost your shutter count and like just try different things. But what's the difference between shooting straight into the light versus shooting with the light behind you? What about a profile shot? Like how does that play off shadows? And I don't know, like the experimentation of that type of stuff is actually what creates the art. There are a whole bunch of rules in terms of how you get the most out of your equipment with light, but in terms of your framing of a shot, your composition, all that sort of stuff, I think that's the beauty of creativity, because there's a myriad of different ways to use it. If you say, if you're a musician, you've got like kind of 12 notes to play with, and they're the same 12 notes that Mozart had. You know what I mean? Like, but there's this myriad of different ways that you put those together in terms of dynamic and in terms of like layering and in terms of like however you want to look at it. You're just basically taking this palette which is kind of like set. With light there's kind of like an infinite palette, isn't there? Like so think of all the different ways that you could use it. So I don't know, trial and error, that's my thing. Just keep trying, and then you kind of, after a while, you learn to know what works and what doesn't work, or what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, there's so many photographers out there that have a different style because they've experimented to the point they're like, I love this. But what's fascinating is if you look at my landscape, for example, a few years ago to what it is now, it's changed in the style. Mm-hmm. There was never a moment of change. It was just tweaking to what I like now, which probably in a couple of years will again shift and change. I also love the idea of that when photography, where it started, there was a certain style that was acceptable. Mm-hmm. And there were rules that were broken and experiments were taking place that people sort of shunned at the time. And then they are now lighting conditions that are known in the industry. And so that beauty of going, there are rules that we need to learn, and then when you learn them, you can manipulate to create something that you don't need to be worried about it being off in the current space. because you're actually pushing and stretching the creativity of the equipment and of photography into new spaces.
There's a thing on Instagram at the moment, which kind of frustrates me, but I get it, is that like people posting their blurred shots, like especially in weddings and stuff like that. It's kind of like here's a grainy black and white, low contrast, blurred shot. That'd be the first thing to hit the scrap pile, once upon a time. But now it's just kind of like, oh, here's art. Now I guess if enough people do it, it's a new feel. But what is it about that out of focus, blurred, grainy shot that tells a story? And it actually does tell a story. It's just a different kind of story.
Yeah.
And you either like those types of stories or you don't. So kind of sky's the limit.
I love that. I heard a while ago that that photography isn't, when you're taking a photo, it shouldn't be about something, it should be of something. It should be of the story that unfolds. So you're not taking a photo about a chair, you're taking a photo of a chair and what happens in that chair and where that chair's placed and how it's used, and that's determines. And I think that's a really helpful tool, like when you're doing family shots, when you're out and about, you see something cool, you're involved in that story, right? You're part of that story and you want to capture it, and so many people are frustrated because they pull out their phone and they go click and go, oh, and they have to tell the story accompanying it. But I think it's all about perspective. There's a certain perspective you have that you see something from, you're like, that's brilliant. And that might not be then the same perspective, but capturing the movement or the light or the subject in that way that evokes that same emotion in you. There's this style coming into landscape photography. I don't know if it'll ever get up. One of my mates, Tongi, is mad keen on this. It's intentional shutter movement. So you put a filter on so it's dark. You put your shutter speed to slow, and you take a photo of, say, I don't know, a house, and as you do you click and then move, and so the photo ends up, it's like really clear, but then it's this blur, and in taking in the right thing in the right light, it looks incredible, truly nostalgic and mysterious. You can also stuff it up and it looks just dreadful, but I wonder if that sort of style will gain more and more traction as more people dismiss it and then go, oh, but I'll give it a go.
But that, even then, that kind of like shows movement. So you do it a lot with dancing, where you'd do like a slow shutter speed, but you'd fire off a flash. So the main image is kind of captured in a moment, but then it sort of catches this trail. And what that says is there's movement here. There's something happening and that's portrayed in a way that you can't get with a, super fast shutter speed where there's actually no movement represented in the shot. So I actually like that. I'm going to play with that.
That's cool. I'll do it, man.
And I would also say that, like, when you're experimenting, like, experiment with the extremes of things, because then you kind of know how, like, where your boundaries are. Like, so go crazy on that sort of stuff, and then you can sort of pull it back. I actually find it in editing, where when you discover a new technique, you like way overcompensate.
Yeah.
Like, so the first time I realized that you could make people's eyes pop a little bit more, I just gave everyone alien eyes for a while. And I look back on those photos from that time and I go, back off on the alien eyes. But just like a tiny, like 10% maybe might be something that actually then looks natural but makes a photo pop. So, as you're exploring, you explore the extremities of things, and then you sort of dial it back to a place where it actually looks like actually conveying something natural.
That's
Unless
awesome.
you wanted to do alien eye photography.
Well, that's true. More aliens.
Make a thing.
Weirder. Yeah.
Make a
Do
thing.
you reckon that's a trend that'll come into wedding?
Who knows what trends will come?
Yeah. There's some landscape photography where you completely overexpose. So you might have a surfboard at the beach and you're overexposed, so you just kind of have a silhouette of the surfer and everything else is completely washed out. And you look at the back of the camera like, this is rubbish, but you put it into post and actually bring up a little bit of the shadows and dull down a little bit of the highlights, and you realise, oh wow, it conveys something of the simplicity of everything. And so something that you never ever overexpose, like way overexposed, 4 or 5 stops on a landscape, actually brings you into a new realm of, oh, I've never explored this space before.
Yeah, and maybe that's just covering up for really bad photographers.
Yes.
I don't know, just like, but if someone's like presenting it in a different way, I don't know. I think you need to learn your craft and your art, and then you push it in the different extremes. But you don't know until you've actually experimented. And everything for me with creativity is experimenting and exploring and kind of going, I haven't seen it done like this before, or I haven't seen it presented like this before. So I think everybody's got a creative spark in them that can actually see things from a perspective that nobody else can see them from. Like that's the beauty of humanity.
Yeah.
So you're always going to see things slightly different to the way I am, and so I can appreciate that as a fellow creative. And then I don't go, Rolf, you're a better creative than I am, or I'm a better creative than you. You're just like, it's relative.
Yeah.
Like I just go, wow, doesn't matter what gear I have, how much experience I have, I'm never going to see things from that perspective.
Yeah.
So you've got something unique to share.
Yeah, that's cool. I love the fact that there's no two photos in the world exactly the same. There's something always shifts about that, whether it's a tiny bit of angle or light or something. There's difference. So everybody has something beautiful to contribute. So when I remember it was about 9 years ago, I was shooting. We were at the same event. It was a dark room, and I had a camera and was shooting and struggling with it. And you introduced me to the idea of ISO.
Right.
So you're like, bump up your ISO. I'm like, oh, what's ISO? And realised that this whole other realm of photography exists.
Yeah.
Now, somebody watching this, they may have a nice camera, like lens interchangeable, that's been sitting in the car, but they're like, oh, I'm keen to get in. How would they start without going through all the settings and what they think? Like, how would they approach, I've got this camera and I can put it on auto and take a photo. What's my next step? How do I get better and feel more confident in this art of photography?
Yeah, so when I started out, you start on P, you're on the P setting, right?
Yeah.
And you just kind of let it do it all. And then as you get more into it, then I make one of the settings manual and the rest of them auto. So if I'm working with shutter, I'm going to set it to that setting. So I can control the shutter, but everything else is auto. And then I can control the aperture, but everything else is auto. And then, as you go, you can sort of figure out what each thing does. But that's where I'd start with P and just point and shoot and get a good shot, and then just go, okay, well, how can I actually get more depth in this shot? Okay, well, I want to play with aperture. All right, so let's go to the aperture priority setting on your camera, and then let's just start playing with what that means in terms of the amount of light that I let in, how much depth of field that I get, etc. And then sort of go from there. So just do a couple of days of shooting just on aperture priority, or just on shutter priority, or set everything else manual and let it do auto ISO and see what it changes about the shot. I don't know.
I love it. Yeah, that's awesome, man. And you would shoot on manual nearly all the time?
Now I shoot on manual for everything.
Do you ever go back to aperture priority or shutter priority or even auto?
No. The only thing I'd set to auto now is ISO.
Yeah. It's good with moving in and out of light, right?
Yeah, and especially for weddings and stuff like that, where you're in dark areas and then you're sort of running outside to get a shot. I mean, you're probably actually going to be tweaking a handful of things at once if you're going from indoors to outdoors all the time. But maybe, for example, a reception where there's low light all the time, I'll probably want to set everything else to manual, and then just let the ISO just change. And then you just embrace the grain that's introduced to that. Just a little trick that I do. I'll get a set of shots, especially if they're in low light, and I'll color grade it, and then I'll just flick black and white on and off, and all of a sudden an ordinary photo looks amazing just by switching between black and white and color.
Yeah.
And if I switch it to black and white and I love that shot, I won't give that shot to them in color. I won't give it to
because it doesn't look the same.
Because I'm just well, I would have ditched it in color, but in black and white it says something, and then you can get away with more grain in a black and white photo than you can in a color photo, and I don't know why. That's just probably from the days of photojournalism. Newspaper, you just expect to see.
And grains, the fuzziness in the detail of ISO and the less striking contrast in the photo. Let's talk about gear just for a sec.
Okay.
So you've just got a Mavic 2 drone. Mm-hmm. Epic. You would have seen a review on that by now, and if you haven't, we'll put it at the end of this video so you can get stuck into it. Gear. How important is gear? Obviously, for professional weddings, absolutely. But when should a person upgrade their gear? If they've bought a point and shoot, and they're like, all right, I'm kind of bored with this. Then they go to a bottom of the range DSLR. How do they know? Do you improve your lenses first, your glass? Do you improve your body? How do you navigate that? Do you do nothing and just get amazing just on that?
I would always say you upgrade when your tools become a limit to your ability, to your creativity, because not even creativity, but just there are certain things that your tools prohibit you from doing because you've got to a certain level of competence. So you become a master at what you have, and then you go, oh, okay, I know what to do here, but my gear's limiting. Okay, then I look at upgrading gear. But before that, like, what's the point? It's like someone hands an L plate of a Ferrari, like, you're not going to get the best out of the Ferrari, right? It's just like, let's drive a Datsun 120B first, and then just like figure out how all that works, and then I can upgrade. Maybe don't go straight from the Datsun to the Ferrari.
Yeah, that's a big step. I think with that too, you, as you push the limits of each of your cameras, you're becoming better and better. If you jump straight to a top end, you're never really going to explore the capacity and capabilities of that camera. You're always going to be limited to this little bit, because you're not actually limited when you start by the machinery you have. It's actually by what you know.
When I first learned to play the guitar, I wanted to learn a song really well on a bad guitar, so that when I bought myself a nice guitar, I all of a sudden sounded like a better guitarist. So, but my thing was just like, I'm going to try and get the most out of this dodgy, poorly set up, bad sounding guitar. And if I can make that sound good, then a good guitar, I'm going to make that amazing. That was my pathway. So that's what I would say. When your gear limits your ability, like, then upgrade. And what would I upgrade first? Probably lenses.
And that's why it's important to commit to an ecosystem, whether it's Nikon or Canon or Sony or Fuji or whatever it is. When you buy your first camera, I always enjoy the intuition of it. Every camera works a little bit differently, and I shoot Nikon because I love the intuitive. It works from the way my head works. But because of that, I'm committed to Nikon now. And to change everything means to change everything. And I'm glad I am, but it would have been helpful to know at the start, you don't really want to change brands later on unless you have to or you've got the coin to do it, because it's just a massive investment. So you'd upgrade glass first. And primes versus telephoto?
Depends what the application is. Probably primes, generally.
Lower aperture.
So for weddings, you just get a nicer bokeh effect, and I like to use primes for weddings because you just get that beautiful depth of field, and it's just, you just get more clarity out of the lens. But having said that, like a 2470 2.8 gives you a really good broad framework, and I've shot weddings just on that. Apologies to any super pro wedding photographers that just switched off.
All the people that had their wedding photos taken.
That's it. What? He used it.
That's it.
2.8. But the 24 to 70 is a good wide angle, slightly zoom. I used to use that on a APS-C sensor because that's all I could afford. So like I had one nice lens and I had a crop sensor camera, but that's what I had, so that's what I shot my first weddings on. And then I'm just like, oh, my low light just sucks. Then I'm like, well, I've actually got a good lens for low light, but I just don't have a good sensor for low light, so I actually upgraded my body first, in complete contradiction to what I just said before. But that was the limitation, right? That was the limitation of my gear. Okay, I need to get something that's better, a sensor that's better in low light, so I got a 5D Mark III.
Just jump straight in, right? And also, one of the big differences between crop sensor and full frame is crop sensor gives you it crops in, which means you can zoom further, but you're not as wide. But also, it gives you one less stop of light. So a full frame gives you a full stop of light more, which means a 2.8 on a crop sensor is about a 4 f4. Dog just here, but a 2.8 on a full frame is a 2.8. And I never realised that until I got my first full frame. I went, oh wow, this is incredible.
It's a massive.
But I had to appreciate that. I really had to flog my crop sensor to as much as I'm like, oh, okay, there's limitations here, and go, wow.
So and on a crop sensor, like anything above say 2,500 ISO, it just looks terrible. But I can go to 10,000 on a 5D before it's terrible. Which is amazing. Just gives you, as we were saying, gives you more scope based on the equipment. But until you know that you need it, it's probably not worth you actually heading there. We've got the dogs just climbing all over us. We're in a dog park. Well, we're not really. We're next to a dog park in a beautiful setting.
Thanks, man. This has been a
That's good.
blast.
I like it. That's great. Let's talk more about creativity, and I'll ask you questions in the next.
All right, and I'll try and give you as good answers as you've given me. Thanks, everybody. Hang on, I'm still here. I would love to know if that format of conversation without the wind and the environmental factors is something you'd like to hear more of and see more of and engage more of. If you have any questions that were captured or evoked for you that I can perhaps help out with, put it in the comments below. If you have any other insights to add to enrich our conversation, that's what this channel's all about. So put them in the comments below, subscribe, become part of what we're doing, and I'll see you soon.
Great question.
Thanks. I didn't give him any warning about this either. I'm just like, let's just shoot some video. He's like,
Here they
hundreds of dogs.